Okay, so next I want to add a dashboard page and then the ability to edit and destroy episodes. So first off, let's go to the podcast controller. Let's close out of these pages, podcast controller. And for this, I'm going to do def dashboard end. And I want to tweak this a bit. So let's move this into a private method. You say def find podcast. And let's add that here. And then let's move the episodes to a private method of def find episode. Paste that in and end. So we're going to save that. Then up top, we need to do a before action of find podcast. And we only want this on the show and the dashboard. And then let's copy that and change this to find episode. And saying we only want it on the show and the dashboard. So if I go back and refresh, let's make sure everything's working still. On this podcast show, everything looks good. So we are going to change the routes a bit. So right now, the root of the application goes here. But if we're signed in, I want it to go to the dashboard. So let's open up the routes file. And we can do a method from a device called authenticated podcast or user or whatever device model you are using. Do, and we'll end it. We're going to route the application to the podcast controller dashboard action. And then we have to say as authenticated underscore root. And then we are going to move the welcome index to the bottom. So what this does is if you're not signed in, you'll see the welcome index as the root of the application. If you are signed in, we'll see the podcast dashboard. So let's save this, go back and refresh. So I'm getting a routing error and I'm going to go back. I think it's because I didn't do podcasts. So let's change that and refresh. Okay, so we get a new error. Couldn't find podcasts with ID. So I ran into this issue while I was creating the demo application for this course. And the fix was to add a conditional statement around the def find podcast. So what we're going to do is change it to where if params of ID is .nil. So if Rails couldn't find a podcast without an ID, what we're going to do is do @podcast equals current podcast. Else we're going to do @podcast.find params, find by params of ID. Now if I refresh, that error goes away and I get a template is missing error. So let's add that template. So what we are going to do is go under podcasts, create a new file, save this as dashboard.html.erb. And then remember when we created or edited the edit file, I'm going to copy all of this and use it for the dashboard. So the account settings should not have the current link. The episode should have the current link. So I'll add a class of current to the first li. So save that, refresh. So now we have the episodes. We have a link to new account settings and podcasts. If I go to account settings, you can see we get that. Episodes, it's not clickable at the moment, so we are going to change that. For now, let's just take care of the dashboard. So in the static dashboard.html, we have the, under the links, we have the episode. So I'm going to copy all of this as well as the pagination. Let's get rid of that and go down and paste it in. Tab it over. There we go. Okay, so like before, we need to create a loop for our podcast. So we're going to do under the UL at episodes.each do episode. And then below here, I'm going to end that. So for each episode, we'll have a image and then the H2. We'll change this to a link to episode.title. And then we'll go to podcast episode path at podcast, episode path at podcast, and then episode. And then the description is going to be the opening Ruby, the truncate method, episode.description, length of 160. And then close that, save, and let's go back and refresh. Perfect. Okay, so now let's change the links for the authorized links. What we want to do is do a link to edit, and we're going to go to the edit podcast path at podcast, and at podcast episode. And I'm going to copy that. This is going to be delete. And this one is going to go to the podcast episode path at podcast episode. And then we'll do comma method of delete. And we will do another comma and confirm it. So we'll do data confirm. Are you sure? So let's delete those. Go back, see if we get any errors, which we do. Edit podcast path. Let's go to rake routes, or terminal, and do rake routes. Rake routes, plural. So edit podcast episode path. Did I misspell something? Edit podcast. Oh, I did. Episode underscore path. Refresh. There we go. So those links won't work just yet because we have not set that up. But let's add the styling to this page. So first, I'm going to delete those extra static LIs, like so. Save that. All right, much better. Now, we copied over the podcasts, app assets, style sheet, podcasts. And did we import that? We did. Okay. Oh, okay. So I'm going to grab this right here and then put it inside of the podcast show. See if that's the issue. There we go. Okay, so it just needed to be inside of the podcast show. I think we have an extra div, must have copied over from the static content. Yeah, so that looks good. Let's make a link to the new episode and make sure all the links in the podcast dashboard are good. Okay, so on the dashboard page, the current episodes is highlighted. That should not be a link. So let's change this to link to new episode. And we will go, let's see, rake routes, new podcast episode path. And we might get an error for that, which we do. So let's do at podcast episode, or at podcast, refresh. There we go. Let's check it out. And that works. All right, so let's fix that podcast page, or the episode new page. So we'll go to episode new, and let's copy over everything from here. And then let's go to the edit, devise edit page, and copy the class form, as well as the field wrapper for each one. So let's tab this over. Let's tab this over. This should be inside of a div field class, or with class of field. Let's do an end, or closing div. Let's get rid of these BR tags. And then I'm going to do the same for the description. And then let's see what we did for the button. Let's see. Let's add the same classes to this. All right, and then we will add a closing div, another one, and one more. Save that. Now let's go back and refresh. So we're getting a syntax error for the submit. I think it might be the comma. There it is. So now we have the new episode. Let's make sure the new episode is highlighted. So let's remove the class from episodes and add a class to the new episode link. Class equals current. And then this is going to become a link to episodes, and it's going to go to the dashboard. So let's look at what route that is. So you can see it's the root. So we are going to go to the root path. Let's refresh. So that's worked. If we go to episode new, that works. Account settings, and view podcast is the only one that we need to change, and that is going to go to the current user's podcast. So let's change this to a link to as well. View podcast. Then we're going to go to the podcast path of the current user's podcast, so the current podcast. Save and refresh. Let's make sure that is good on the dashboard page. Save. Not sure why I did that. The edit page is good. So let's make sure these links work, which from the account settings, one does not work already, new episode, or the view podcast. Let's remove the class of current because we're on the edit page right now. View podcast, that works. And the episode does not work. So let me grab that link as well to the root path. Save that. Refresh. So now on the dashboard page, we need to fix the view podcast. There we go. So all those links are good, and we're looping through all of our episodes. So let's do a get s. We'll do a get add dot, get s, get commit. We're going to say message of add dashboard. Say added dashboard for user. So the next thing we want to do is make sure these edit and destroy links actually work. So if we click the edit, we'll go to the edit page, but we get an unknown action. So what we need to do is add that action in the episodes controller. So let's go to the episodes controller, and we are going to do a def edit end, and then a def update end. Save. Now we get a template is missing error. So let's go under episodes, create a new file, save this as edit.html.erb. So what we're going to do is move this into a partial file. So I'm going to copy that, create a new file under episodes, save it as underscore form.html.erb. The underscore is for the partial. So let's paste that in. In the new, we are going to change that to render form. And let's make sure, let's go back and make sure the new still works. New episode. Okay, that's good. Now we should be able to use this same form for the edit. So I'm just going to paste this in for now, and I'm going to click on edit. So we're getting a argument error in the episodes edit, and I believe that's because in our episodes controller, we are not finding that episode because in the before action, we're only doing the show. So we should just be able to do edit. Let's do one for update. And before we forget, let's do one for destroy. Let's go back and refresh. There we go. So now the edit form shows up. Let's style this real quick. Let's go to the edit page. Actually, new page. I'm just going to copy. I'm going to copy all of this actually. Then let's go to edit. And I believe, let's save that, refresh. Cool. So the only thing we should do is remove the current link or current class from the new episode, because technically we're on a new page, the edit page. So if we try to update the episode now, it won't work because the episode controller, the update action, has not been written yet. So what we're going to do is, since we're already finding the episode, let's do if episode.update with the episode params. We're going to redirect to podcast episode path at podcast and then at episode. Then let's put up a notice to the user. Say episode was successfully created or updated. Else we will render the edit form and then end it. So let's try to update this and see if it works. This works. This really, really works. Update. So we get the episode was successfully updated, and you can see we get redirected to the episode show page with the updated content. So let's try to go to our dashboard again. Let's go to the root. Let's try to edit episode number 1. I'm just going to say blah, update. Awesome, that works. Let's take care of the delete method as well. So let's do def destroy, and we're already finding the episode. So what we need, all we need to do now is at episode.destroy. And then after we destroy it, let's redirect to the podcast path. Actually, after we destroy it, let's redirect to the root path, which in This case would be the dashboard. So let's refresh. Let's try to delete one of these. Are you sure? Click OK. All right, and now that third one is gone. We can, if you didn't see that, let's delete the one that says blah. Delete, are you sure? Awesome. So that is working correctly. One last thing I want to do is change the link to the dashboard from the header. So let's go to search for the application HTML file. Then if user signed in, we're going to change this and we're going to go to link to the dashboard, which will go to the root path. Save that. And since we did the authenticated root in the last episode, that means in our welcome index, we can remove this altogether because a user won't see this if they're signed in. So we can just have the regular link tos for if the user's not signed in. So now if we go to localhost, they see this as they should. So let's do a git status. See everything we've done. Let's do a git add dot git s git commit -am with the message add, edit, and destroy ability to episodes. All right, now let's do a git push since we haven't pushed up in a while. And do git push Heroku master. Okay, so now let's do a Heroku run rig-db migrate. Okay, and let's go check out the Heroku application and refresh, see if we get any errors. Cool, so let's go to the dashboard, create a new episode. Say this is a test episode. And I will just say blah, 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 blah. Create episode. Perfect. So we got the episodes. Go to the podcast page. It's looping through the dashboard, showing it. We can edit. Awesome. And delete it. Cool. In the next episode, we're going to add authorization so a user can only access their own content and edit their own stuff.